Tonight, you are not here to learn something new. You are here to stop carrying what never needed to be held in the first place. Most minds do not resist sleep because they are alert. They resist sleep because they are unfinished. They are replaying conversations, rehearsing futures, correcting past versions of the self that no longer exist. Zen never tried to force the mind to relax. That would only create more tension. Instead, Zen stories remove the reasons the mind thinks it must stay awake. So do not listen with effort. Do not try to remember anything. Let these words pass through you the way wind passes through an open room. Nothing here requires your participation. 1. The mind does not need to be fixed. A monk once came to his teacher and said, "My mind will not settle. Please help me calm it." The teacher replied, "Show me your unsettled mind." The monk paused. He searched. He waited. He looked inward the way people do when they are convinced something is wrong with them. But no matter how hard he tried, he could not find anything solid to present. There was no object he could place in his hands, no shape he could point to, no single thing he could say, "This is it." The teacher smiled and said, "There, I have already calmed it for you." This story sounds simple, almost playful, but it points directly at the core mistake most people make about their inner life. The mind creates suffering not because it moves, but because it believes that movement is a defect. Restlessness becomes a diagnosis. Wandering becomes failure. Thinking becomes an enemy that must be subdued. From the moment you wake up, you are subtly trained to believe that a good mind is a quiet one, a focused one, a controlled one. When your thoughts jump, replay memories, imagine futures, or drift without permission, you assume something is wrong. You tighten. You correct. You try to force yourself back into order. Zen does not do this. Zen never treats thought as a problem to be eliminated. Thought is seen as movement, nothing more. Clouds move across the sky. Wind moves through trees. The mind moves through ideas, images, and sensations. None of this requires fixing. Movement only becomes suffering when it is resisted. When you try to fix the mind, you unknowingly split yourself in two. One part of you takes the role of supervisor, constantly monitoring what appears in awareness. The other part becomes the supervised, judged for every unwanted thought, every distraction, every moment of mental noise. This inner division creates tension that never fully turns off. Sleep cannot come while there is conflict. The body reads this inner struggle as danger. Muscles stay slightly engaged. Breathing remains shallow. The nervous system stays alert, not because of external threat, but because there is an internal one. You are at war with your own experience. Most people believe they are tired because their mind is too active. This is inaccurate. Activity does not exhaust the system. Resistance does. Children think all day and sleep easily. Animals are alert all day and rest without difficulty. What exhausts you is the constant effort to control what does not need controlling. Notice how tiring it is to argue with yourself, to push thoughts away, to judge yourself for having them, to demand calm instead of allowing it. This effort continues quietly for hours, often without your awareness. By night, the system is depleted, not from thinking, but from fighting thinking. The moment you stop treating your thoughts as mistakes, something profound happens in the body. The nervous system stops defending itself. There is no longer an internal authority issuing corrections. The muscles receive the signal that vigilance is no longer required. Breathing deepens without instruction, not because you tried to relax, but because there is no longer a reason not to. This is why Zen stories rarely offer techniques. Techniques imply that something must be done to reach a better state. Zen points instead to what can be stopped. Stop judging the movement of the mind. Stop labeling restlessness as failure. Stop assuming that silence must be manufactured. When you lie down at night and thoughts appear, the old habit returns. You think, "I shouldn't be thinking." You try to push the thoughts away. You tell yourself to calm down. This only reinforces the idea that the mind is misbehaving. The body hears the command as urgency and responds with more tension. But if thoughts appear and you do nothing with them, no correction, no commentary, no attempt to improve the moment, something else happens. The mind is allowed to complete its movement. Thoughts rise, drift, and dissolve on their own, the same way a sound fades when it is no longer sustained. Zen understands that the mind settles not when it is controlled, but when it is trusted. Trust does not mean believing every thought. It means allowing thoughts to exist without turning them into a problem. A thought that is not resisted loses energy. A thought that is not judged does not need to defend itself. Without friction, mental activity slows naturally. Tonight, nothing needs improvement. There is no ideal mental state you must reach before rest is allowed. You do not need to be calm enough, empty enough, or quiet enough to deserve sleep. The demand for readiness is the very thing keeping you awake. Nothing needs control. Control is a daytime tool, useful for action and decision. Night is not for management, it is for release. The body already knows how to sleep. The mind already knows how to fade. They only fail when you interfere. Allow the mind to move freely, without supervision, without correction, without expectation. Let thoughts come and go the way weather passes through an open landscape. You do not need to chase them away, and you do not need to follow them. When the struggle ends, even briefly, the system recognizes safety, and when safety is recognized, sleep does not need to be invited. It arrives on its own. Letting go is not an action. Most people believe letting go is something you must do, a decision you make, a technique you apply, a moment of strength where you finally release what has been bothering you. This belief is the first obstacle. Zen teaches that letting go is not an action at all. It is the absence of unnecessary effort. The moment you try to let go, you are still holding. You are gripping the problem with one hand while pretending to release it with the other. There is an old Zen story about a traveler crossing a river. He ties his belongings into a bundle and lifts it onto his back to keep them dry. The crossing is difficult. The current is strong. But eventually, he reaches the other side safely. Instead of setting the bundle down, he continues walking with it strapped tightly to his shoulders. When another traveler asks why he is still carrying it, he replies, "I already carried it across the river." This is how the mind treats worry, regret, and tension. The danger passes. The moment ends. The conversation is over. But the mind keeps carrying the weight as if something bad will happen if it sets it down. It confuses familiarity with necessity. It assumes that because something was once useful, it must remain useful forever. Letting go does not require courage. It requires clarity. The body only holds tension when it believes tension is still needed. Muscles stay tight because the nervous system thinks it must remain ready. Thoughts repeat because the mind believes repetition is protective. When you tell yourself to let go, the system does not understand what you mean. It hears effort. It hears command. It hears urgency. Zen never commands the mind to release. It simply shows the mind that holding is no longer required. Think about how naturally you let go of a sound after it fades. You do not force it away. You do not congratulate yourself for releasing it. Once it no longer serves a purpose, it disappears without resistance. This is how letting go is supposed to feel. The problem is that most people treat mental tension as if it must be actively dismissed. They sit in bed at night and think, "I need to let go of today." But this statement is still an instruction. It still implies work. It still keeps the mind engaged. Sleep cannot arrive while you are still trying to complete something. Letting go happens the moment the mind understands that vigilance is no longer necessary, not because you ordered it, but because the situation has changed. Right now, there is nothing you need to prepare for, nothing that benefits from further thinking, nothing that improves by being replayed. The day has already ended, whether your mind agrees or not. Zen points out something uncomfortable but freeing. The mind does not relax because you want it to. It relaxes because it realizes there is no longer a job to do. When effort stops making sense, effort stops automatically. This is why forcing calm never works. Calm is not produced. It is revealed when interference ends. Notice how difficult it is to stay tense when there is truly nothing at stake. The body wants to release. The breath wants to slow. The muscles want to soften. The only thing preventing this is the belief that something still requires your attention. At night, the mind often invents importance. It tells you this is the perfect time to analyze your life, rehearse future conversations, or solve problems that did not bother you all day. This is not insight. It is the nervous system struggling to downshift. Zen warns against trusting the mind when it is tired. Fatigue amplifies urgency. Exhaustion makes everything feel critical. The content of the thoughts is less important than the state producing them. Letting go begins when you stop negotiating with your thoughts. You do not need to argue with them. You do not need to answer them. You do not need to finish them. You can simply allow them to exist without responding. When a thought is not fed, it cannot sustain itself. When a sensation is not resisted, it completes its cycle. The mind naturally moves towards stillness when it is no longer being pushed or pulled. This is why Zen emphasizes non-doing, not apathy, not suppression, but non-interference. The understanding that life continues to function even when you step out of the way. Tonight, you do not need to release anything intentionally. You do not need to forgive, resolve, understand, or improve anything before rest is allowed. All of that can wait, or it may dissolve entirely once sleep does its work. Letting go is not a performance. It is not something you succeed or fail at. It happens quietly, often unnoticed, the moment you stop insisting that the mind stay alert. When effort ends, holding ends. When holding ends, the body recognizes safety. When safety is recognized, sleep comes naturally. You do not need to cross any threshold. You do not need to reach a certain state. You only need to stop carrying what the moment no longer requires. And when you do, even briefly, the system will take over from there. 3. Silence is not empty. A student once asked a Zen teacher, "Why do you value silence so much?" The teacher did not answer. He poured tea into the student's cup and kept pouring until it overflowed onto the floor. Only then did he stop and say, "There is no space left to receive anything." This story is not about rudeness or cleverness. It points to how the mind misunderstands silence. Most people think silence is an absence, a lack of sound, a void that must be filled. Because of this misunderstanding, silence feels uncomfortable, threatening even. The mind rushes to occupy it with thoughts, memories, plans, and explanations. Zen does not see silence as empty. It sees it as unoccupied. There is a difference. Emptiness suggests something missing. Unoccupied simply means nothing is being placed there right now. The space itself is complete. When the mind begins to quiet at night, many people experience a subtle panic. Thoughts slow, gaps appear, awareness becomes less sharp, and immediately the mind reacts by generating more noise. It asks questions like, am I falling asleep? Is this working? Why am I still awake? These questions are not curiosity, they are resistance. The mind fears silence because silence removes its role. As long as there is noise, the mind has something to do. It can comment, judge, analyze, and narrate. In silence, there is nothing to manage, no story to maintain, no identity to defend. This feels like loss of control. Zen understands that this fear is the final barrier before rest. Silence is where the nervous system resets. It is where the body repairs itself. It is where the mind stops consuming energy. But you cannot enter silence by trying to be silent. That effort only creates more activity. The famous Zen question about the sound of one hand clapping was never meant to be answered. It was designed to exhaust the mind's habit of grasping. The moment the mind realizes it cannot solve something conceptually, it pauses. In that pause, silence reveals itself. Not as nothingness, but as stability. Notice that silence already exists between thoughts. It is not something you create. It is something you usually overlook because you rush past it. The mind is trained to move from one thought to the next without rest, the way a person jumps from stone to stone without noticing the water beneath. Zen invites you to notice the water. At night, when thoughts begin to space out, do not pull them back. Do not try to stay alert. Do not congratulate yourself for being calm. Any form of monitoring reactivates the mind. Silence does not need supervision. This is difficult because you have been trained to believe awareness must be maintained at all times. But awareness is not fragile. It does not disappear if you stop watching it. In fact, it naturally softens when it is no longer being held in place by effort. The body knows how to move towards sleep. It has done so every night of your life. The only times it struggles are when the mind interferes, trying to manage the process. Silence feels unsafe only when you believe you must remain in control. Zen stories often describe enlightenment as ordinary: eating when hungry, sleeping when tired, sitting without needing a reason. Silence belongs to this ordinariness. It is not mystical. It is not special. It is the default state when nothing is being forced. Think about how silence feels in nature. A quiet forest does not feel empty. A still lake does not feel lacking. Their silence feels full, grounded, complete. The mind only struggles with silence when it believes something must be happening at all times. At night, nothing needs to happen. You do not need to be alert. You do not need to be productive. You do not need to understand anything. The moment you stop demanding meaning, silence stops feeling like a threat. Many people say they cannot sleep because their mind is noisy. In reality, they cannot sleep because they do not trust silence. They mistake the slowing of thought for something going wrong. They intervene just as the system is about to shut down. Zen teaches patience with quiet. Not patience as endurance, but patience as non-interference. Let silence arrive in fragments. Let gaps appear and disappear without comment. Let awareness blur at the edges. These are not signs of losing control. They are signs of the body taking over. Silence does not announce itself. It does not arrive dramatically. It slips in when you stop checking whether it is there. If tonight you notice moments where nothing in particular is happening, resist the urge to label them. Do not think, "This is silence." Do not think, "This is good." Labeling pulls you back into activity. Silence is not an experience to observe. It is the absence of observation. This is why Zen masters often appear ordinary, even dull. They are not chasing heightened states. They are resting in what remains when nothing is added. Sleep is the same. Sleep does not come because you achieve quiet. It comes because you stop interrupting it. When silence appears, let it remain unfinished. Let it be incomplete. Let it be unnoticed. The more invisible it becomes, the more deeply the system relaxes. Eventually, there is no need to listen anymore. No need to stay present. No need to hold awareness in place. And when even the effort to be silent dissolves, the body crosses the final threshold on its own. Silence was never empty. It was simply waiting for you to stop filling it. 4. Nothing important happens at night. A Zen teacher once said, "Do not make life decisions after sunset." This was not a rule about discipline or morality. It was an observation about how the mind behaves when the body is tired. At night, perception distorts. The mind loses accuracy but gains urgency. Thoughts feel heavier, problems feel larger, and emotions feel more absolute. The same situation that seemed manageable in daylight suddenly feels unsolvable. This is not insight. It is exhaustion, wearing the mask of importance. Zen warns against trusting the mind when the body is depleted. During the day, the nervous system is supported by movement, light, interaction, and structure. At night, these supports fall away. The mind is left alone with its own momentum. Without external reference points, it begins to turn inward, looping familiar concerns, replaying unresolved moments, imagining future scenarios. The mistake most people make is assuming that because a thought appears at night, it must be addressed immediately. This assumption keeps the system awake. The mind tells you that this is the moment to analyze your life, to fix relationships, to prepare for tomorrow, to solve problems that have existed for weeks. It frames these thoughts as urgent, as if ignoring them would be irresponsible. Zen sees through this illusion. Nothing important needs to be resolved at night. Problems that matter benefit from clarity, energy, and perspective, all of which are weakest when you are tired. Night thinking is narrow, repetitive, and emotionally charged. It does not generate solutions. It recycles tension. There is a reason wise traditions separate day and night. Day is for action and engagement. Night is for restoration and withdrawal. Confusing these roles leads to imbalance. When you lie awake thinking, you are not being productive. You are overstimulating a system that is trying to shut down. The body interprets mental activity as readiness. As long as you are planning, evaluating, or rehearsing, the nervous system assumes you must remain alert. Muscles stay subtly engaged. Breathing remains shallow. Hormones associated with wakefulness continue to circulate. This is why telling yourself to just relax rarely works. Relaxation is not compatible with perceived urgency. As long as the mind believes something is important right now, the body will not stand down. Zen offers a simple correction. Postpone. Not suppression. Not denial. Postponement. You are not rejecting your thoughts. You are acknowledging that they belong to another time. Just as you would not schedule a meeting at midnight, you do not need to process complex issues when the system is exhausted. This reframing alone can dissolve tension. When the mind understands that nothing is required of it right now, it begins to release its grip. Consider how often nighttime thoughts repeat themselves. The same worries appear night after night, often without progress. If these thoughts were truly productive, they would have resolved themselves by now. Their persistence is evidence that night is not the right environment for resolution. Zen does not encourage fighting these thoughts. It encourages seeing through their false urgency. When a thought arises tonight, instead of following it, notice the tone it carries. Is it calm, or does it feel pressured, heavy, insistent? Urgency is a sign of fatigue, not truth. You are allowed to ignore thoughts without answering them. Ignoring is not avoidance. It is appropriate timing. The mind resists this idea because it confuses attention with responsibility. It believes that if you stop thinking, something bad will happen. But consider how often your best insights come after rest, not during exhaustion. Sleep reorganizes the mind in ways conscious effort cannot. Zen trusts this process. Trust does not mean nothing matters. It means not everything matters right now. Night is not the time to judge your life. It is not the time to measure your progress. It is not the time to replay mistakes or rehearse future conversations. These activities belong to daylight, when the mind has resources. When you lie down, the most skillful action is non-engagement. Let thoughts arise and pass without giving them importance. They are echoes of the day, not instructions. There is a subtle relief in realizing that you do not have to solve anything before sleeping. The day does not demand completion. Life does not require closure at midnight. Zen understands that the world continues even when you rest. The sun will rise whether you stay awake or not. Problems will still be there in the morning, often smaller than they seemed at night. When the mind releases its belief in nighttime importance, the body responds immediately. Muscles soften, breathing deepens, the sense of pressure eases. Sleep is not something you earn by finishing your thoughts. It is something that arrives when you stop treating the night like a workplace. Nothing important happens at night, and realizing this is often enough to let the body finally let go. 5. Rest is a form of wisdom. A monk once asked his teacher, "What is the fastest way to progress on the path?" The teacher replied, "Do not be in a hurry." This answer frustrates the modern mind because it contradicts everything it has been trained to believe. You are taught that effort equals virtue, that endurance equals strength, that pushing through exhaustion is admirable. Rest, in contrast, is treated as weakness, indulgence, or something you earn only after everything is finished. Zen completely rejects this logic. Zen sees rest as intelligence, not emotional comfort, not escape, but accurate perception of reality. When the body is tired, continuing to push is not discipline. It is ignorance of signals. Fatigue is not a moral failure. It is information. The body communicates through sensation. Hunger means eat. Pain means stop. Tension means something is being carried that no longer fits. Sleepiness means the system needs to reset. Ignoring these signals does not make you strong. It makes you disconnected. Zen masters never praised exhaustion. They praised attunement. Knowing when to act and knowing when to stop are equally important skills. One without the other creates imbalance. Most people do not struggle with sleep because they are lazy. They struggle because they do not allow themselves to rest. Even when lying down, the mind continues working, evaluating the day, planning tomorrow, measuring itself against invisible standards. This is not rest, it is delayed effort. True rest is not simply lying still, it is the absence of demand, the absence of self-monitoring, the absence of the belief that you must be doing something to justify your existence. Zen teaches that rest is part of the path, not a break from it. Consider how nature rests. Trees do not apologize for winter. Animals do not feel guilty for hibernation. The tide does not rush to return once it recedes. Rest is woven into every living system because it preserves balance. Humans are the exception only because they resist what is natural. At night, when the body asks for sleep, the wise response is compliance, not negotiation. You do not need to finish the day perfectly to deserve rest. You do not need to feel satisfied, accomplished, or resolved. Sleep is not a reward for productivity. It is maintenance. The nervous system depends on cycles of activation and deactivation. Without proper rest, activation becomes chronic. Stress hormones remain elevated, muscles never fully release. The mind stays in low-grade alert even when there is no threat. Over time, this erodes clarity and resilience. What feels like mental weakness is often simply nervous system fatigue. Zen understands this at a deep level. This is why Zen practice emphasizes simplicity. Fewer obligations, fewer unnecessary movements, less mental clutter. All of this conserves energy so it can be used when truly needed. Rest is not passive, it is active restoration. When you allow yourself to rest without guilt, the body shifts from defense to repair. Cells regenerate, memory consolidates, emotional charge dissipates. Problems that felt heavy lose their weight. Many insights that seem impossible during exhaustion appear effortlessly after sleep. This is not coincidence. It is biology aligned with wisdom. The mind resists rest because it fears losing momentum. It fears falling behind. It fears becoming irrelevant if it stops performing. Zen gently exposes this fear as illusion. You do not disappear when you rest. You do not lose value when you stop striving. You do not fall behind by sleeping. You regain accuracy. At night, the most skillful thing you can do is step out of the way. Let the body take over. Let the mind loosen its grip. Let the system recalibrate itself without interference. Zen does not ask you to collapse or give up. It asks you to listen, to respond appropriately to conditions. When conditions call for rest, wisdom lies in resting fully. Tonight, rest is not avoidance. It is alignment with reality. The body is tired. The day is over. The mind does not need to stay sharp. There is nothing noble about resisting sleep. There is nothing virtuous about exhaustion. Strength is knowing when to stop. When you allow rest without judgment, something shifts. The pressure eases. The constant internal demand softens. The mind no longer feels chased by expectation. And in that space, sleep arrives not as collapse, but as return. Rest is not the opposite of effort. It is what makes effort meaningful. And tonight, rest is enough. 6. You do not need to finish the day. A student once asked a Zen teacher, "How do I know when I have done enough?" The teacher replied, "When the sun sets." This answer was not poetic, it was practical. The mind believes the day must be completed before rest is allowed. Tasks must be finished. Emotions must be resolved. Conversations must be replayed until they make sense. Only then, it thinks, is sleep justified. Zen sees this belief as a misunderstanding of how life actually works. Days do not end because everything is resolved. They end because energy cycles. Light fades. The body shifts. The nervous system moves from engagement to withdrawal. This transition happens whether you cooperate with it or not. Trying to finish the day mentally keeps you awake because it fights a natural rhythm. Most of what you revisit at night does not need closure. It needs distance. Problems rarely resolve through repetition. They resolve when the system resets and perspective returns. Zen teaches that life unfolds in continuous flow, not in completed segments. There is no final checkbox that grants permission to rest. Waiting for that moment creates endless delay. Consider how often you replay conversations at night. You adjust your words. You imagine better responses. You argue with versions of people who are no longer present. This feels productive, but nothing changes. The event remains in the past. The only thing happening is renewed activation of the nervous system. Finishing the day in your head does not improve the past, it only extends it. Zen does not encourage suppression. It encourages timing. There is a time for reflection and a time for release. Night is for release. You do not need to understand everything that happened today before you sleep. Understanding deepens with rest, not with exhaustion. Clarity arrives when the mind is refreshed, not when it is strained. This is why Zen monks emphasize routine: wake, eat, work, rest. The structure itself removes the burden of deciding when enough is enough. The day ends because it ends. Modern life lacks this boundary, so the mind tries to create one internally. It reviews, evaluates, judges, hoping to feel complete. But mental completion is an illusion. There will always be something left undone, unsaid, or unresolved. Zen accepts this without anxiety. Unfinishedness is not a problem. It is the natural state of things. When you lie down at night, you are not abandoning your responsibilities. You are placing them down temporarily. Nothing breaks because you stop holding it. In fact, many things stabilize once you do. Sleep reorganizes the mind in ways conscious effort cannot. Emotional charge softens. Connections are made without intention. Perspective returns quietly. Trusting this process is an act of wisdom. The mind resists because it fears that letting go means losing control. It imagines that if it stops reviewing, something important will slip away. But control at night is mostly illusion. Fatigue reduces accuracy. What you think you are managing is often just anxiety looping. Zen invites you to stop pretending that nighttime thinking is productive. You are allowed to leave things incomplete. You are allowed to pause without resolution. You are allowed to rest in the middle of a story. Life does not require you to tie every thread before sleep. Threads can wait. When you accept that the day does not need to be finished, something inside you relaxes. The pressure to review fades. The urgency dissolves. The body recognizes that it is safe to disengage. There is nothing you need to finalize tonight. Nothing you need to perfect. Nothing you need to decide. Morning will bring light, energy, and perspective. Night offers only restoration. Zen trusts the rhythm of this exchange. Lay the day down as it is. Incomplete, imperfect, unfinished. That is not failure. That is reality. And when you stop trying to complete what cannot be completed, the body takes over and does what it has always known how to do. It rests. 7. Sleep is not something you enter. A Zen student once asked, "How do I reach deep sleep?" The teacher replied, "You don't." This answer sounds unhelpful until you understand what it points to. Most people believe sleep is a destination, a state you must arrive at, a doorway you must pass through. Because of this belief, they spend the night trying to get somewhere, monitoring progress, checking whether it is happening yet. This effort is the final obstacle. Zen teaches that sleep is not something you enter. It is something that happens when effort ends. Think about how sleep has arrived every night of your life without instruction. As a child, you did not need techniques. You did not manage your breathing. You did not ask whether you were doing it correctly. Sleep came because nothing blocked it. As you grew older, you learned to interfere. You learned to watch yourself, to measure your state, to worry about outcomes. This turns sleep into a task, and tasks require effort. Effort keeps the nervous system active. An active system does not sleep. Zen understands that the body already knows how to shut down. The problem is not lack of ability, it is excess involvement. When you lie in bed thinking, "I need to fall asleep," you create a subtle tension. The mind is now waiting for something to happen. Waiting is activity. Monitoring is activity. Hoping is activity. Sleep does not coexist with activity. This is why Zen emphasizes non-striving, not because striving is bad, but because some processes unfold only when striving stops. You cannot force digestion, you cannot force healing, you cannot force sleep, you can only stop interfering. Notice how sleep arrives when you are not trying, on the couch during the day, while watching something unimportant. When your guard is down, the moment effort disappears, the body takes over. At night, the mind resists this surrender. It wants to remain present. It wants to witness the moment sleep arrives. But the very act of watching keeps you awake. Zen does not ask you to make sleep happen. It asks you to stop trying to be awake. This does not mean forcing unconsciousness. It means allowing awareness to soften, letting attention blur, allowing the edges of experience to fade without pulling them back into focus. The mind panics slightly when awareness begins to dissolve. It feels like losing control. It reacts by sharpening attention, bringing thoughts back, checking whether you are still conscious. This reflex is learned. It is not necessary. Zen stories often describe enlightenment as falling asleep while awake. Not literal sleep, but the same quality of non-grasping. No effort to hold experience in place. Sleep requires this same surrender. You do not need to cross a threshold. You do not need to reach a depth. You do not need to notice the moment it happens. If you notice it, you are still awake. Zen invites you to stop caring whether you sleep or not. This sounds counterintuitive, but it works because it removes pressure. Pressure is the last thing keeping the system alert. When you no longer demand sleep, the body stops resisting. When you stop checking for results, the process completes itself. There is nothing wrong with drifting in and out. There is nothing wrong with half-awareness. There is nothing wrong with losing track of time. These are signs that effort is dissolving. The body knows when to let go. It has been doing this longer than you have been thinking. Trust replaces control here. Trust that breathing will continue without you guiding it. Trust that the heart will keep beating. Trust that awareness does not need supervision. Zen does not glorify consciousness. It respects rest. The mind often fears sleep because sleep feels like disappearance. But nothing essential disappears. Only effort fades. Only tension dissolves. Only the watcher steps aside. What remains is restoration. If tonight you find yourself waiting for sleep, notice the waiting, not to change it, but to see it. Waiting is effort. Effort is wakefulness. When waiting loses meaning, sleep arrives. You do not need to go anywhere. You are already in the place where sleep happens. All that is required is to stop standing in the doorway. Let awareness loosen without comment. Let thoughts fade without being finished. Let the body sink without instruction. Do not try to sleep. Allow sleep to come to you. And when even the idea of allowing disappears, when there is nothing left to manage or observe, the final step takes itself. Sleep was never something you had to reach. It was what remained once you stopped trying to arrive. 8. The self does not need to be held. A student once asked a Zen teacher, "Who am I when I am asleep?" The teacher replied, "Who is asking?" This question was not meant to confuse. It was meant to loosen the grip the mind has on identity. Most people stay awake not because of thoughts alone, but because of the constant effort to maintain a sense of self. All day, you hold together an image: who you are, what you should be, how you are doing, what others think of you, what tomorrow demands of you. This image requires continuous maintenance. At night, when the body tries to rest, the self refuses to step down. The mind believes that if it stops holding the story together, something essential will be lost. It fears that without constant narration, you will disappear, become careless, fall behind, or lose control. Zen sees this fear as unnecessary. The self you are protecting is not fragile. It does not need guarding through the night. In fact, it loosens naturally every time you sleep. You wake up in the morning without having monitored yourself all night, and nothing has collapsed. What keeps you awake is the effort to remain someone. Notice how many nighttime thoughts begin with, I should have done this. I need to do that. I can't believe I said this. I must remember to do that tomorrow. These thoughts are not about survival. They are about identity maintenance. They keep the sense of me active, alert, and engaged. Zen teaches that rest begins when the self is allowed to dissolve temporarily. This does not mean erasing yourself or becoming detached from life. It means recognizing that identity is a daytime function. It is useful for navigation, communication, and responsibility. It is not required for sleep. When you lie down, you do not need to keep track of who you are. You do not need to maintain your roles, your standards, or your narrative. The body does not need a story to rest. It only needs safety. The reason silence and stillness feel uncomfortable is because they threaten the continuity of the self. In deep quiet, there is no reference point, no mirror, no feedback. The mind reacts by producing thoughts to re-establish identity. Zen does not fight this reaction. It simply invites you to notice it. If you stop feeding the story, it fades on its own. Think about moments when you were completely absorbed in something simple, watching the ocean, listening to rain, drifting before sleep. In those moments, you were not actively being someone, yet you were not lost. You were not diminished. You were at ease. This ease comes from not having to hold yourself together. At night, the most compassionate act is to let the self rest too. You do not need to review who you are. You do not need to correct yourself. You do not need to prepare your identity for tomorrow. Tomorrow's self will assemble itself again without effort. Zen trusts this process. The mind resists because it believes control equals existence, but existence does not require constant confirmation. You exist even when you are not thinking about yourself. Sleep depends on this trust. When the sense of self loosens, even slightly, the nervous system relaxes. There is less pressure to perform, less need to evaluate, less internal commentary. The body recognizes that it is safe to disengage. This is why deep sleep often feels like disappearance, not because you vanish, but because the self steps aside. Zen does not see this as loss, it sees it as relief. Tonight, you do not need to be anyone in particular. You do not need to hold your identity in place. You can let the image soften, blur, and fade without fear. You will still be here in the morning. Nothing essential is at risk. When the effort to be someone releases, even briefly, the system enters a deeper state of rest. Thoughts thin out. Awareness dims. The body takes over without resistance. The self was never meant to work overnight. Lay it down with the rest of the day. And when there is no longer a need to hold yourself together, sleep arrives quietly, without announcement, without effort. Not as something you do, but as something that happens when you finally let go of being. 9. Trust the body to finish what the mind started. A Zen teacher once told his students, "When you are hungry, your body knows how to digest food without your help. When you are tired, it knows how to sleep the same way." This teaching cuts against a deep habit in modern thinking, the belief that the mind must manage everything. You have been taught, subtly and repeatedly, that awareness equals control, and control equals safety. Because of this, even when the body signals that it is ready to rest, the mind insists on staying involved. Zen sees this as misplaced responsibility. The body is not an assistant waiting for instructions. It is a system refined by countless repetitions. It knows how to regulate breath, heart rate, muscle tone, and hormonal balance without conscious input. Sleep is not a mental achievement. It is a biological process that completes itself when conditions allow. Most sleep problems are not caused by the body failing. They are caused by the mind refusing to step aside. Think about how much effort you invest in trying to sleep. You adjust your position. You monitor your breathing. You check how relaxed you feel. You wonder whether enough time has passed. Each of these actions signals involvement. Each one tells the nervous system that something still requires attention. Zen teaches a different approach. Trust completion to the body. During the day, the mind initiates many things. It decides where to go, what to do, how to respond. But at night, the body finishes the work. It consolidates memory, releases tension, repairs tissue, and recalibrates emotional tone. The mind cannot do these things directly. It can only interfere with them. This is why Zen emphasizes surrender to natural processes, not surrender as defeat, but surrender as accuracy, knowing which part of the system is best suited for the task at hand. At night, the mind is not the expert, the body is. The mind resists this handoff because it fears loss of control. It worries that if it stops watching, something will go wrong. But nothing essential requires supervision during sleep. The body has completed this cycle thousands of times without conscious oversight. You do not need to guide your breath. It will slow on its own. You do not need to tell your muscles to relax. They release when the nervous system shifts into safety. You do not need to manage your thoughts. They lose coherence when attention withdraws. Zen understands that the final step into sleep is not a step at all. It is a letting go of management. Many people mistake trust for passivity. They think that if they stop trying, nothing will happen. In reality, stopping effort allows deeper systems to engage. The same way stopping interference allows digestion to proceed, stopping mental involvement allows sleep to complete. Notice how sleep arrives most easily when you are distracted, not focused. When you are reading something dull, listening without attention, or drifting without intention. These moments work because the mind is no longer supervising the process. Zen does not ask you to distract yourself deliberately. It asks you to stop insisting on participation. The body knows when it is safe. Safety is not created by vigilance. It is recognized when vigilance ends. When the mind stops scanning for results, the body shifts into repair mode. This is why effortlessness feels so different from relaxation techniques. Techniques keep the mind engaged. Trust allows disengagement. At night, you do not need to check whether sleep is happening. You do not need to measure depth or progress. These measurements pull you back into wakefulness. Sleep completes itself best when it is unobserved. Zen invites you to trust that what you have already set in motion during the day will be finished without your involvement. The work of living pauses. The work of restoration begins. You can let the body take responsibility now. It knows how to finish what the mind started. 10. Nothing is missing. A Zen student once approached his teacher and said, "I feel like something is missing. That is why I cannot rest." The teacher looked at him and said, "If something were missing, you would already know what to look for." This teaching points to a quiet but powerful truth. The mind often keeps itself awake by maintaining a vague sense of incompleteness. Not a specific problem, but a feeling that something has not been resolved, achieved, or understood. This feeling does not come from reality. It comes from habit. The mind is trained to search. From the moment you wake up, It scans for tasks, threats, improvements, and opportunities. This scanning becomes so constant that it feels natural. When night arrives and there is nothing left to scan, the mind becomes uncomfortable. It interprets the absence of targets as lack. Zen sees this as misinterpretation. Nothing is missing because nothing needs to be added. The moment is already complete, even if the mind cannot label it. Completion is not something you achieve at night. It is something you recognize when searching stops. Many people believe they cannot sleep because something unresolved is pulling at them, but when asked to name it clearly, they cannot. The feeling remains abstract, vague, unspecific. This is a sign that there is no real problem, only a momentum of seeking. Zen teaches that the urge to seek does not shut off automatically. It must be allowed to wind down. Searching requires energy. When the search loses its object, it continues out of habit. At night, the mind continues asking without knowing what it wants. It keeps you alert not because there is danger, but because it has not been told it can stop. Zen does not argue with this impulse. It simply reveals that the search has no target. If something truly needed your attention, it would be clear. It would have form. It would present itself directly. Vague dissatisfaction is not a signal of missing truth. It is a leftover pattern from a day of constant engagement. The body knows when nothing is required. The mind has to learn this again and again. This is why Zen practice emphasizes sitting without purpose, not to gain insight, not to reach peace, but to allow the habit of seeking to exhaust itself. When there is nothing to look for, the mind eventually rests. At night, this rest appears as sleep. You do not need to find the missing piece. There is none. You do not need to remember something important. If it were important, it would return in daylight. You do not need to complete a final thought before sleeping. Thought does not complete. It only pauses. Zen understands that peace does not arrive by addition. It arrives by subtraction. When the extra demand falls away, what remains is enough. This is difficult for the mind to accept because it is accustomed to earning states. It believes rest must be justified, that peace must be deserved, that sleep must be reached. Zen dissolves this belief. You do not need to become calmer. You do not need to feel satisfied. You do not need to understand anything. The moment is already whole. When the mind stops searching for what is missing, it releases its grip on wakefulness. There is nothing left to pursue, nothing left to solve, nothing left to hold in place. The system recognizes completion not as an event, but as the absence of effort. This is the deepest rest. Nothing is missing. And when there is nothing left to find, the mind finally allows itself to disappear for the night. 11. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. A Zen student once said to his teacher, "I am waiting for the right moment to rest." The teacher replied, "Waiting is why you are tired." This teaching exposes a subtle habit that keeps many people awake long after the body is ready to sleep. The mind believes there is a correct condition for rest. A certain calm must be reached. A certain quiet must appear. A certain feeling must arrive. Until then, rest is postponed. Zen sees this as misunderstanding the nature of rest. There is no perfect moment to sleep. Sleep is not a reward given when conditions are ideal. It is a natural response to fatigue, and fatigue does not wait for perfection. The body asks for rest as soon as it needs it. The mind is the one that delays. Waiting creates tension. It keeps the system alert, scanning for signs that it is finally allowed to let go. This scanning is the opposite of rest. As long as you are waiting, you are still engaged. Zen teaches that rest begins the moment you stop negotiating with the present. Many people lie in bed waiting for their thoughts to slow down before they relax. But thoughts slow down only after relaxation occurs. Others wait for their body to feel heavy before allowing sleep. But the heaviness comes after surrender, not before. This reversal keeps the cycle going. The mind wants confirmation before it releases control. Zen asks for trust instead. Trust that the body knows when it is tired. Trust that sleep does not need ideal conditions. Trust that rest can begin even while thoughts are still present. Think about how often you delay rest during the day. You tell yourself you will relax after one more task, one more message, one more thought. Nighttime waiting is the same habit, only quieter and more exhausting. Zen does not wait for the moment to be right. It recognizes that the moment is already sufficient. There is no threshold you must cross, no final signal you must receive, no internal alignment that must occur before you are allowed to stop. The body is already prepared. The nervous system is already leaning toward shutdown. The only thing holding it back is the belief that something else must happen first. Waiting is effort disguised as patience. When you stop waiting, effort dissolves. The mind no longer needs to monitor progress. The body receives the signal that nothing more is required. This does not mean forcing sleep. It means removing the condition that sleep must feel a certain way before it is allowed. You can rest even if your mind is active. You can rest even if awareness is sharp. You can rest even if sleep has not arrived yet. Rest begins with permission, not with outcome. Zen teaches that the moment you fully allow yourself to rest, sleep becomes irrelevant. Whether you sleep or not no longer matters, and that is precisely when sleep arrives. The irony is simple. The more you wait for sleep, the more awake you remain. The moment waiting ends, the system completes itself. Tonight, there is nothing you are waiting for. You do not need the moment to change. You do not need yourself to change. You do not need sleep to arrive before rest begins. Stop waiting. Lay the mind down as it is. Let the body take over without conditions. When the need to wait dissolves, there is nothing left to hold you awake. And without announcement, without effort, sleep does what it has always done. It comes. 12. Allow the day to fade without review. A Zen teacher once told his students that the day does not need a summary. It does not require analysis, judgment, or interpretation before it ends. It fades the way light fades at sunset, gradually and without explanation. The problem is that the modern mind refuses to let the day dissolve on its own. Most people carry the day into the night by reviewing it. They replay conversations, evaluate their actions, measure themselves against expectations, and imagine how things should have gone differently. This review feels responsible, even necessary, but it quietly keeps the nervous system active. The body hears review as continuation. As long as the day is being mentally processed, it is not over. Zen sees this habit clearly. Review is not closure, it is attachment. The mind believes that if it does not look back, something will be lost. It worries that lessons will be missed, mistakes will be repeated, or meaning will slip away. But this belief misunderstands how understanding actually forms. Insight does not come from repetition under exhaustion. It comes from distance. When you replay the day at night, you are not seeing it more clearly. You are seeing it through fatigue. Fatigue narrows perception. It exaggerates regret and minimizes balance. What felt neutral during the day becomes heavy at night, not because it changed, but because the system no longer has the energy to hold perspective. Zen does not deny reflection. It simply assigns it the proper time. Reflection belongs to daylight, when the mind is rested and the body is stable. Night is not for learning lessons. Night is for release. Allowing the day to fade means trusting that whatever truly matters will remain without being forced. Important experiences do not disappear when you stop thinking about them. They integrate naturally during sleep. Memory consolidates. Emotional charge softens. Meaning organizes itself without conscious effort. This is why forcing review is unnecessary. The body already has a process for sorting the day. It does not need your supervision. The urge to review often comes from fear of incompleteness. The mind wants to feel finished before resting. Zen understands that life does not finish itself daily. It continues. Each day dissolves into the next without formal closure. You do not need to decide what today meant before you sleep. You do not need to judge whether it was good or bad, productive or wasted. These labels add weight to something that is already passing. When you allow the day to fade without review, you remove the last reason to stay mentally engaged. The mind no longer needs to hold images in place. The body senses that there is nothing left to manage. This permission is powerful. It signals safety. It tells the nervous system that vigilance is no longer required. Muscles release. Breathing deepens. Awareness begins to soften. Zen teaches that endings do not require ceremony. They require acceptance. Tonight, you do not need to look back. The day has already moved on. Whatever was unfinished will either return naturally or lose its importance by morning. Nothing essential depends on your nighttime attention. Let the images loosen. Let the moments blur. Let the narrative dissolve without correction. The day does not need to be remembered in order to be complete. When review ends, rest begins. And in that quiet fading, sleep arrives not as something you achieve, but as what remains when there is nothing left to hold. 13. You do not need to be aware all the time. A Zen student once asked his teacher, "If awareness is important, should I try to remain aware even while sleeping?" The teacher replied, "Who told you to stay awake?" This exchange reveals a subtle misunderstanding that keeps many people restless. Somewhere along the way, the mind learns that awareness is always good, and that losing awareness is dangerous, lazy, or irresponsible. As a result, even when the body is exhausted, the mind refuses to fully let go. It keeps a thin thread of alertness active, as if something important must be watched. Zen does not teach continuous awareness. It teaches appropriate awareness. Awareness is a tool, not a commandment. It is useful when action is required and unnecessary when rest is needed. Trying to remain aware at all times is like keeping your eyes open while eating or forcing yourself to listen while digesting. It confuses function with identity. At night, awareness becomes counterproductive. When you monitor your state, track your breath, check your thoughts, or observe whether sleep is approaching, you remain engaged. This engagement keeps the nervous system partially active. The body interprets awareness as readiness. Readiness delays sleep. Zen understands that awareness naturally fades when it is no longer needed. This fading is not loss, it is transition. The mind often resists this transition. It feels like slipping, like losing control, like disappearing. The instinctive response is to pull back into clarity, to sharpen attention, to reassert presence. Each time you do this, you reset the sleep process. The irony is that awareness does not need to be protected. It returns on its own every morning. You fall asleep every night without supervision and wake up without effort. This alone proves that awareness is not fragile. It does not vanish permanently when you stop holding it. Zen teaches trust in this cycle. Many people believe they cannot sleep because their mind will not stop. In reality, they cannot sleep because they will not allow awareness to dim. They keep themselves slightly awake out of habit, not necessity. This habit often begins with self-improvement practices that emphasize constant mindfulness. While useful during the day, these practices become obstacles at night. The mind confuses presence with tension. Zen distinguishes between clarity and clinging. Clarity during the day allows skillful action. Clinging at night prevents rest. At night, the most skillful act is to stop observing. You do not need to notice when thoughts fade. You do not need to track how relaxed your body feels. You do not need to stay present for the moment sleep arrives. If you are present for it, you are still awake. Allowing awareness to blur is not negligence. It is cooperation with the body's natural rhythm. The edges of experience soften. Sounds lose definition. Time becomes unclear. These are signs of safety, not danger. Zen teaches that rest requires forgetting yourself for a while, not erasing yourself, but stepping out of the way. The mind fears this forgetting because it equates awareness with existence. But existence does not depend on continuous attention. You exist when you sleep. You exist when you dream. You exist when you wake. Nothing essential is lost when awareness rests. Tonight, you do not need to remain conscious of anything. You do not need to witness sleep. You do not need to remember falling asleep. You can let the lights dim without standing guard. When the effort to stay aware dissolves, the body completes the transition effortlessly. Awareness fades the way light fades at dusk, not abruptly, not violently, but naturally. Zen trusts this fading. And when you allow it without resistance, sleep finally deepens beyond reach of thought, beyond monitoring, beyond awareness itself. Not because you achieved it, but because you stopped insisting on staying awake. 14. Nothing needs to change right now. A Zen teacher once said, "If you want peace, stop trying to improve the moment." This teaching feels almost wrong to a mind trained on constant adjustment. You are used to fixing, optimizing, correcting, and refining everything you touch. When something feels uncomfortable, the instinct is to change it immediately. At night, this instinct becomes the enemy of rest. The mind scans the present moment and looks for flaws. The body feels slightly tense, so you try to relax it. The breath feels uneven, so you try to smooth it. Thoughts appear, so you try to quiet them. Each small correction sends the same message to the nervous system: something is not okay yet. Zen sees this clearly. Change implies dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction implies threat. Threat keeps the system awake. The body cannot rest while it believes the present moment is inadequate. Most people think they are trying to make things better at night, but what they are really doing is rejecting how things are. They treat the current state as a problem that must be fixed before rest is allowed. This creates a subtle but continuous tension that never fully turns off. Zen offers a radical alternative. Nothing needs to change right now. This does not mean nothing will ever change. It means change does not belong to this moment. Night is not for adjustment, it is for acceptance. The body does not require perfect conditions to sleep. It does not need ideal posture, perfect breathing, or complete mental silence. It needs one thing only: the absence of threat. The moment you stop trying to improve the experience, the body recognizes safety. Notice how exhausting it is to constantly monitor yourself. Even small adjustments keep the mind engaged. Each attempt to fix something pulls you back into control mode. Control mode is incompatible with deep rest. Zen understands that improvement is a daytime activity. Daylight is for effort, direction, and correction. Night is for allowing the system to be exactly as it is without judgment. When you stop trying to change the moment, resistance dissolves. Sensations no longer feel like problems. Thoughts no longer feel like intruders. Everything is allowed to exist without commentary. This permission is deeply calming. The mind often argues with this teaching. It says, "But if I do not change anything, things will stay wrong." Zen responds quietly, "Things only feel wrong because you are trying to change them." The present moment does not require your approval. It does not need to meet standards. It does not need to become something else before rest is possible. You can sleep while thoughts are present. You can sleep while sensations are imperfect. You can sleep while the mind is still active. Sleep begins when you stop demanding a different experience. Zen teaches that peace is not achieved by arranging conditions. It is revealed when the need to arrange falls away. The moment you stop correcting, the system settles on its own. At night, the most compassionate thing you can do is stop interfering. Let the body breathe the way it wants. Let the mind think the way it wants. Let sensations rise and fall without management. Nothing is wrong enough to require fixing right now. When the urge to change dissolves, the nervous system downshifts. Muscles soften without instruction. Breathing deepens without effort. Awareness loosens without force. This is not something you do. It is something that happens when you stop doing. Tonight, you do not need to improve yourself. You do not need to fix the moment. You do not need to become calmer, quieter, or better before sleep arrives. Everything is already sufficient. And when the belief that something must change finally fades, the body recognizes that it is safe to let go. That recognition is rest. That rest is sleep. 15. Let sleep happen without you. A Zen teacher once said, "When you finally stop trying to sleep, sleep will finally try you." This is not poetic exaggeration. It is an exact description of how rest actually works. Most people believe sleep is something they must participate in. They think they need to guide it, prepare for it, or enter it deliberately. Because of this belief, they remain involved right up until the moment they hope to disappear. That involvement is precisely what keeps them awake. Zen sees sleep as an autonomous process. It does not require cooperation. It only requires the absence of interference. From the body's perspective, sleep is not mysterious. It is a sequence of chemical, neurological, and muscular shifts that occur when conditions are right. Darkness, stillness, safety, and reduced stimulation signal the system to power down. The body knows how to do this without explanation. The mind disrupts this process by insisting on staying present. It wants to witness the transition. It wants confirmation that sleep is happening. It wants to remain in charge until the very end. Zen calls this mistrust. You do not supervise digestion. You do not oversee wound healing. You do not manage your heartbeat. Sleep belongs in the same category. It is finished by the body, not by the mind. The moment you try to let sleep happen, you are still involved. Letting becomes another task, another subtle effort, another way of staying awake. Zen asks for something simpler and more difficult at the same time. Step away completely. This does not mean forcing unconsciousness or pretending to be asleep. It means withdrawing interest, losing curiosity about the outcome, allowing the process to continue without your attention. Think about how sleep arrives during illness or deep exhaustion. There is no effort, no planning, no waiting. Consciousness simply slips away because the body no longer allows negotiation. Zen invites you to approximate this state without needing to be sick or depleted. The key is indifference to outcome. When you no longer care whether sleep arrives soon or later, the pressure dissolves. Pressure is the last barrier. Pressure keeps the mind alert because it implies importance. Sleep does not respond to importance, it responds to safety. Safety is recognized when nothing is being monitored. At night, the mind often believes it must stay involved to prevent something bad from happening. But there is nothing to prevent. The body has shut down safely every night of your life without instruction. Zen teaches that the final act of rest is disappearance of effort. Not disappearance of consciousness as a goal, but disappearance of management. You do not need to guide your breathing. You do not need to hold your body still. You do not need to maintain any particular mental state. All of these imply participation. When participation ends, the body finishes the process alone. This is why people often say they fell asleep without realizing it. The moment of sleep is not experienced because experience itself requires awareness. When awareness steps aside, there is nothing left to report. Zen sees this as success, not failure. Tonight, allow yourself to become irrelevant to the process. Let the body do what it has always done. Let the mind lose interest. Let awareness blur without being rescued. Do not try to fall asleep. Do not try to relax. Do not try to let go. Simply stop inserting yourself into what does not require you. When you finally step away, even briefly, the system recognizes the opening and closes the door behind you. Sleep does not need your help. It only needs you to get out of the way. 16. Rest does not need to be deep to be real. A Zen teacher once said, "Even shallow water quenches thirst." This teaching challenges another belief that quietly keeps people awake. The idea that rest only counts if it is deep, complete, or perfect. Many people lie in bed worrying not just about whether they will sleep, but about how well they will sleep. They measure depth. They anticipate consequences. They calculate how tomorrow will feel if tonight is not ideal. This mental accounting keeps the system alert long after the body is ready to rest. Zen does not evaluate rest by depth. It evaluates rest by absence of struggle. Rest begins the moment you stop fighting wakefulness. Even light rest restores the nervous system. Even drifting, dozing, or half-awareness allows repair to begin. The belief that anything less than deep sleep is failure creates unnecessary pressure, and pressure is incompatible with rest. The body does not operate on an all-or-nothing scale. It works in gradients. Each moment of reduced tension, each breath taken without effort, each thought allowed to pass without engagement contributes to recovery. Zen understands this continuity. The mind, however, prefers extremes. It labels states as success or failure, asleep or awake, rested or exhausted. These labels create tension because they turn rest into a performance. At night, the most skillful approach is to allow whatever level of rest is already happening. Do not upgrade it. Do not judge it. Do not try to deepen it. The moment you try to go deeper, you introduce effort. Effort pulls you back toward wakefulness. Zen invites you to notice the relief already present, the warmth of the body, the softness of the bed, the slowing of thought. These are not prerequisites for sleep. They are rest itself. Many people underestimate how much recovery happens before unconsciousness. Muscles release, heart rate slows, stress hormones drop. The body begins its work long before the mind disappears. This is why lying awake peacefully is very different from lying awake anxiously. One restores, the other depletes. Zen teaches that peace is not something that happens after sleep. It can happen instead of sleep, and often leads to sleep naturally. The fear of not sleeping enough keeps the system activated. It frames rest as fragile and insufficient. Zen dissolves this fear by removing measurement. There is no score to keep tonight. You do not need to reach a certain depth. You do not need to stay asleep for a certain length of time. You do not need to protect tomorrow by controlling tonight. The body adapts. It compensates. It restores in layers. Trusting this flexibility removes urgency. When you allow rest to be imperfect, it often deepens on its own. When you stop insisting on depth, depth arrives. Zen understands that the mind's demand for optimal outcomes is what keeps the system from receiving any outcome at all. Tonight, accept whatever level of rest is available. Let it be light, let it be fragmented, let it be undefined. Rest does not need to be deep to be real. The moment struggle ends, restoration begins. And from that restoration, sleep often emerges quietly, without needing to be forced, measured, or named. 17. Nothing bad happens if you let go completely. A Zen student once whispered to his teacher, "I am afraid that if I let go, something bad will happen." The teacher replied, "What has been happening while you hold on?" This exchange points to a deep fear that rarely gets spoken out loud. Beneath the struggle to sleep is often the fear that full surrender is dangerous. The mind believes that if it truly lets go, it will lose control, lose awareness, or fail to protect something important. Zen sees this fear as misunderstanding. Letting go does not invite harm, it invites rest. The body is not waiting for permission to collapse. It is waiting for permission to stop defending. Defense is useful in danger. At night, defense is unnecessary, but the habit remains. The mind keeps holding on because it believes it is preventing catastrophe. It stays alert to guard against imagined threats, unfinished responsibilities, or vague feelings of unease. This vigilance feels responsible, but it is misplaced. Zen teaches that nothing bad happens when you let go completely because there is nothing that requires guarding right now. The fear of letting go often comes from past experiences where control felt necessary, times when being alert kept you safe. Over time, this alertness becomes automatic, even when the environment is calm. The body does not distinguish between real danger and remembered danger. It responds to tension as if threat were present. Zen invites you to update this response. Right now, there is no emergency. There is no decision that must be made. There is no problem that requires immediate attention. Holding on does not make you safer. It only exhausts you. The mind often equates letting go with disappearance. It fears that if it stops holding itself together, it will dissolve, fall apart, or lose its sense of self. Zen gently points out that this happens every night during sleep, and you return each morning intact. You have let go completely thousands of times already. Nothing broke. Nothing was lost. This understanding is deeply calming. It allows the nervous system to stand down, muscles soften, breath slows. The constant low-grade tension begins to dissolve. Zen does not ask you to force surrender. It asks you to notice that surrender is already safe. Letting go does not mean abandoning responsibility. It means pausing responsibility. Responsibilities do not disappear when you rest. They wait. Often, they feel smaller after sleep. The belief that you must stay engaged to keep life intact is an illusion created by fatigue. Zen teaches trust in continuity. Life continues when you rest. The world does not require your vigilance to keep turning. Tonight, you do not need to hold yourself together. You do not need to monitor your thoughts. You do not need to protect the moment from change. Nothing bad happens if you let go completely. What happens instead is relief. the relief of no longer needing to watch, the relief of no longer needing to manage, the relief of no longer needing to stay ready. When this relief settles in, sleep is no longer resisted. It arrives naturally, not as collapse, but as permission. And when you finally let go without fear, the body does what it has always known how to do. It rests. And rest is safe. 18 time does not need to be tracked. A Zen teacher once removed the clock from the meditation hall and said, "Now you can rest." This was not symbolism. It was a practical instruction about how the mind creates tension by counting. At night, many people are not kept awake by thoughts alone, but by time awareness. They check how long they have been lying there. They calculate how many hours remain before morning. They measure whether sleep has started yet and how much of the night has been lost. This constant tracking keeps the nervous system active. Zen understands that time awareness is a form of vigilance. When you track time, you are preparing for consequences. You are anticipating tomorrow. You are managing outcomes. This keeps the mind oriented toward action, not rest. The body hears this orientation as a reason to stay alert. Sleep does not occur on a schedule that responds to monitoring. It occurs when monitoring ends. The belief that time must be used efficiently does not belong to the night. That belief is useful during the day, when decisions and actions matter. At night, it becomes an obstacle. The body does not restore itself faster because you are counting hours. It restores itself best when it is left alone. Zen teaches that time is a mental construct, not a requirement for rest. The body does not know what hour it is. It responds only to signals of safety, darkness, and non-demand. When you lie awake thinking about time, you are telling the system that something is at stake. You are framing the night as a limited resource that must be optimized. Optimization is effort. Effort delays sleep. This is why checking the clock at night often makes sleep harder. It sharpens awareness. It creates urgency. It pulls you back into evaluation mode. Zen invites you to release time entirely. This does not mean pretending morning does not exist. It means recognizing that tracking time right now serves no useful purpose. Whatever amount of sleep occurs will occur. The body will adapt. It always does. Many people fear that if they stop tracking time, they will lose control of their schedule or their responsibilities. Zen points out that you lose more control by staying awake. Rest restores clarity. Fatigue distorts it. Time anxiety is not preparation. It is interference. When you allow time to blur, the body relaxes. Awareness loosens. Thoughts become less sequential. The sense of before and after fades. This fading is not confusion. It is the natural prelude to sleep. Zen practice often involves sitting without knowing how long has passed. This is intentional. When time disappears, the mind stops leaning forward. Without leaning forward, it stops pulling the body with it. At night, you do not need to know what time it is. You do not need to know how long you have been awake. You do not need to know how much sleep remains. None of this information helps the body rest. The moment you stop counting, the pressure eases. The night no longer feels like something you are losing. It becomes something you are in. Zen understands that rest exists only in the present. Time awareness pulls you out of the present. It replaces rest with anticipation. Tonight, allow the night to be timeless. Let minutes stretch or collapse without measurement. Let awareness drift without reference points. You are not late for sleep. You are not behind schedule. Nothing is being wasted. When time tracking dissolves, the system finally receives the message it needs. There is nowhere to be. There is nothing to count. And in that timelessness, sleep arrives quietly, without needing to be measured at all. 19. The night does not need to be used. A Zen teacher once told his students, "Do not try to make the night useful." This teaching goes directly against a deeply ingrained habit. You have been trained to treat every hour as something that must produce value. Time must accomplish something. Even rest must justify itself. This belief quietly keeps many people awake. At night, the mind looks for purpose. It asks what the night is for. If it is not sleeping yet, it decides it should think, plan, reflect, worry, or improve something. The night becomes another space for effort. Zen sees this as a misunderstanding of rest. The night does not exist to be used. It exists to be entered and allowed to pass. Nothing needs to be extracted from the night. No insight needs to be gained. No progress needs to be made. Treating the night as a resource to be managed keeps the system active. Management is effort. Effort delays rest. Zen teaches that usefulness belongs to the day. The day is for action, decision, and engagement. The night is for withdrawal, repair, and non-doing. Confusing these roles creates imbalance. Many people feel anxious at night because they are not doing anything. This anxiety comes from identity. If you define yourself by productivity, stillness feels threatening. The mind fills the quiet with tasks to maintain its sense of value. Zen gently dismantles this belief. Your value does not disappear when you stop producing. Existence does not require output. The body restores itself without purpose. Sleep is not productive in the usual sense, yet it makes everything else possible. The urge to use the night often shows up as mental activity. You think because thinking feels like doing something. But nighttime thinking rarely solves anything. It only keeps the system alert. Zen invites you to let the night be unclaimed. You do not need to plan tomorrow tonight. You do not need to understand today tonight. You do not need to improve yourself tonight. The night does not demand participation. When you stop trying to use the night, pressure dissolves. The mind no longer needs to justify wakefulness. The body receives permission to disengage. This permission is powerful. It tells the nervous system that it is allowed to power down, that nothing is expected, that nothing will be lost if you stop. Zen understands that rest is not idle time. It is necessary time, but it is not necessary because it produces something. It is necessary because it preserves balance. At night, balance is restored through absence, not activity. Allow the night to pass without purpose. Let it be empty of goals. Let it be free of expectation. Let it be what it already is. When the night is no longer treated as something to use, the mind stops leaning forward. Without leaning forward, tension releases. You are not wasting time by resting. You are not falling behind by doing nothing. You are not failing if the night is quiet and uneventful. This quiet is the point. And when the need to use the night finally fades, the body recognizes the opening and completes the transition into sleep. The night was never meant to be useful. It was meant to let you go. 20. Let the story end for tonight. A Zen teacher once said, "When you sleep, put the story down." This teaching speaks to the final habit that keeps many people awake, the need to keep the narrative running. All day, the mind tells a story. Who you are, what happened, what it means, what comes next. This story helps you navigate the world, but it also creates momentum. At night, that momentum does not automatically stop. The mind keeps narrating, even when the body is ready to rest. It recaps the day, imagines tomorrow, rewrites the past, and rehearses conversations that may never happen. This storytelling feels natural because it is familiar, but familiarity does not mean necessity. Zen understands that the story is optional. The story exists only while attention feeds it. When attention withdraws, the story dissolves. Nothing essential is lost. Life continues without narration. Most people fear stopping the story because it feels like losing continuity. They worry that without the narrative, they will lose themselves. Zen gently points out that you lose the story every night during sleep and wake up intact. You do not need to carry the story through the night to remain whole. At night, the story does not serve you. It keeps the mind engaged and the nervous system alert. Stories require sequence, cause and effect, and meaning. These processes belong to waking life. Zen invites you to let the story end temporarily. This does not mean erasing memory or denying experience. It means allowing the narrative to pause. The day does not need interpretation right now. Tomorrow will provide fresh context. When you stop narrating, experience becomes simple. Sensations exist without commentary. Thoughts lose coherence. Time loses structure. These are not signs of confusion. They are signs of rest approaching. The mind resists because it believes that silence equals emptiness. But Zen sees silence as completion. When the story ends, there is nothing left to add. You do not need to reach a conclusion. You do not need to summarize the day. You do not need to decide what it all meant. The story can wait. Allowing the story to end is not something you force. You simply stop contributing to it. When a thought arises, you do not continue it. When an image appears, you do not explain it. Without fuel, the narrative loses momentum. This is why Zen emphasizes simplicity. Few words, few ideas, few explanations. The less content the mind has to work with, the sooner it rests. At night, you do not need a coherent identity. You do not need a past or a future. You do not need a plot. You are allowed to be unfinished. When the story loosens its grip, the body recognizes safety. The mind no longer needs to stay awake to maintain continuity. Awareness fades naturally. Zen understands that sleep is not the end of the story. It is the pause that makes the story possible. Tonight, let the story end here. Lay it down without conclusion. The body will take over from there. And when the story resumes in the morning, it will do so from a place of rest. 21. You are allowed to disappear for a while. A Zen student once asked his teacher, "If I stop paying attention, who will take care of everything?" The teacher replied, "The same thing that has always taken care of everything." This lesson addresses the final, quiet resistance that remains when everything else has softened. Even after the body is tired, even after thoughts have slowed, there is often a subtle fear beneath it all. The fear of disappearing, not physically, but psychologically. The fear that if you fully let go, you will vanish, neglect something important, or lose your grip on life. Zen sees this fear as unnecessary weight. You have been taught, directly or indirectly, that your presence is required at all times, that attention equals responsibility, that if you are not watching, something will fall apart. This belief keeps the mind hovering just above rest, never fully landing. But consider your own experience. Every night you disappear into sleep. You do not supervise your breathing. You do not guard your memories. You do not protect your identity. And yet you wake up. Life continues. The world remains intact. Zen trusts this continuity. Disappearing for a while is not abandonment. It is participation in a larger rhythm. Just as the tide recedes without apology, consciousness withdraws without danger. Nothing essential depends on your constant presence. The mind resists this because it confuses control with care. It believes that holding on is a form of love or responsibility. Zen gently corrects this misunderstanding. Care does not require tension. Responsibility does not require vigilance without rest. At night, vigilance becomes distortion. When you allow yourself to disappear, even briefly, the nervous system finally receives the message it has been waiting for. There is nothing to guard, nothing to manage, nothing to maintain. Muscles release more deeply. Breathing becomes effortless. Awareness loosens without fear. Disappearance is not a cliff, it is a slope. You do not drop out of existence, you fade. The edges blur. The sense of being someone in a situation dissolves. What remains is simple functioning without commentary. Zen does not glorify this state, it normalizes it. You are not meant to be present all the time. Presence is a tool, not an obligation. Night is the time when the tool is set down. The fear of disappearing often shows up as last-minute thoughts, sudden memories, or a feeling that you should check something one more time. This is the mind's final attempt to stay relevant. You do not need to argue with it. You can simply let it be irrelevant. Nothing bad happens when you are not here for a while. Bills do not vanish. Relationships do not collapse. Life does not unravel because you rested. In fact, things often function better when you return. Zen teaches that rest is not a break from life. It is part of life's movement. Withdrawal and return are equally natural. Tonight, you are allowed to step away. You are allowed to stop being available. You are allowed to disappear without explanation. You do not need to stay aware. You do not need to remain someone. You do not need to keep watch. Let the body carry you where it already knows how to go. When you finally allow yourself to disappear, there is nothing left to resist. And in that absence of resistance, sleep does not arrive as an event. It simply remains. After you are no longer there to notice it. 22. Nothing needs to be held together anymore. A Zen teacher once said, "When you are tired, stop holding the world in your hands." This teaching points to the quiet burden most people never notice they are carrying. All day, and often all night, there is a subtle effort to keep things together. Your plans, your identity, your responsibilities, your emotional balance, your sense of order. None of this effort feels dramatic, but it is constant. This constant holding is what finally exhausts you. The mind believes that if it loosens its grip, everything will fall apart. It assumes that order depends on tension, that stability depends on effort, that coherence depends on constant maintenance. Because of this belief, even when the body is ready to rest, the mind keeps working to hold things in place. Zen sees this as unnecessary strain. Life does not stay together because you hold it. It stays together because it is already functioning. Your effort adds little and costs much. At night, the habit of holding shows up as mental tension. Thoughts repeat not because they are important, but because the mind is trying to maintain continuity. It keeps checking whether everything is still intact. It keeps reinforcing the sense of me managing my life. Zen invites you to stop managing. You are not required to keep your life coherent overnight. Coherence is a daytime activity. At night, fragmentation is not failure. It is release. When you stop holding things together, the mind begins to loosen. Ideas no longer need to connect. Memories lose their sequence. The sense of self becomes less defined. This is not confusion. It is the natural undoing of effort. The body understands this undoing as safety. Safety does not mean everything is controlled. It means nothing needs to be controlled right now. This is why deep rest often feels like falling apart in a gentle way, not breaking, but untying. The knots of the day loosen, The tightness around identity relaxes. The effort to stay organized dissolves. Zen does not ask you to deliberately dismantle anything. It asks you to stop reinforcing the structure. When a thought arises, you do not need to connect it to another thought. When an image appears, you do not need to place it in context. When a feeling moves through, you do not need to stabilize it. Without reinforcement, structure dissolves on its own. The mind resists this because it believes structure equals survival. But survival does not depend on mental order at night. The body knows how to exist without narrative, without plans, without coherence. You have experienced this every night of your life. Sleep is not a controlled state, it is a collapse of control. Zen understands this collapse not as weakness, but as wisdom. Knowing when to stop holding is as important as knowing when to act. Tonight, you do not need to keep anything together. You do not need to maintain your story, your goals, your composure, or your understanding. You do not need to be internally organized. Everything can loosen. When you finally stop holding, there is a deep relief that spreads through the body. Muscles soften, breath settles, the mind stops checking. Nothing breaks. Nothing is lost. What remains is enough. And in that enoughness, the system completes its final transition without effort, without supervision, without resistance. You do not need to hold the night together. Let it fall apart gently. Sleep will take care of the rest. 23. You do not need to arrive anywhere tonight. A Zen student once asked his teacher, "What is the final state I should reach before resting?" The teacher replied, "If you are trying to arrive, you are still traveling." This lesson points to the last subtle form of effort that keeps the mind awake, the belief that rest exists somewhere else, somewhere deeper, somewhere quieter, somewhere more complete than where you are now. As long as the mind believes there is a destination, it stays in motion. Most people lie in bed feeling almost ready to sleep, but not quite. There is a sense that something must still shift. The body must relax a little more. The mind must quiet a little further. Awareness must soften just a bit more. This belief turns the night into a journey. Zen sees this as unnecessary movement. Sleep is not a place you reach. It is what happens when movement ends. The mind is trained to progress. During the day, progress is useful. You move toward goals, solutions, and outcomes. At night, this same habit becomes a problem. The mind continues moving even when the body has stopped. Trying to arrive somewhere keeps the nervous system active. Movement implies purpose. Purpose implies effort. Effort implies wakefulness. Zen teaches that rest begins where you already are. You do not need to sink deeper. You do not need to become quieter. You do not need to reach a certain threshold. The idea of almost there is what keeps you from stopping. When you notice yourself waiting for the final shift, recognize that waiting itself is movement. It pulls you forward into the next moment. It keeps awareness slightly tense, slightly alert. Zen invites you to stop traveling. Not to force stillness, but to stop aiming. The moment you stop aiming, the mind loses direction. Without direction, it cannot continue. This is why sleep often comes when you give up on it. The destination disappears, and with it, the journey. The body does not need you to arrive anywhere before it rests. It begins restoring the moment you stop pushing it toward an outcome. Restoration is not conditional. It does not require achievement. The mind resists this because it equates arrival with safety. It believes that once you reach the right state, you can finally let go. Zen reverses this logic. Letting go is what removes the need to arrive. There is nothing ahead of you tonight. No finish line, no final state, no correct experience waiting to be reached. You are already where rest happens. When the need to arrive dissolves, the last tension releases, the subtle leaning forward disappears. Awareness no longer stretches into the future. What remains is stillness without effort. Zen understands that sleep is not entered from outside. It unfolds from within when nothing is being chased. Tonight, stop traveling. Lay down the idea that you must go somewhere else to rest. You are already here. And here is enough for the body to finally let go. 24. Let everything be incomplete. A Zen teacher once said, "Completion is a habit, not a requirement." This lesson addresses one of the deepest pressures the mind carries into the night, the need for things to feel finished, finished thoughts, finished emotions, finished understanding, finished identity. The mind believes that only when things feel complete is it safe to rest. Zen sees this belief as the final illusion. Life is not complete, and it never is. Every moment opens into another moment. Every thought trails into another thought. Every day ends with something unfinished. Trying to complete life before sleeping is like trying to empty the ocean with your hands. Yet the mind keeps trying. At night, this shows up as the urge to tie things up mentally. You want clarity. You want resolution. You want to feel settled before you allow yourself to stop. When that feeling does not arrive, the mind keeps working, convinced that one more thought will finally close the loop. Zen teaches that this loop does not close through effort. It closes through abandonment. Completion is not something you achieve at night. It is something you stop demanding. The need for completion comes from control. The mind believes that unfinished things are dangerous, that loose ends must be managed, that ambiguity is a threat. But this belief belongs to action, not to rest. During the day, completion helps you function. At night, it keeps you awake. Zen understands that the body does not require completeness to rest. It requires permission to stop trying. When you allow things to remain unfinished, something surprising happens. The pressure drops. The mind no longer has to carry the weight of closure. Thoughts lose urgency because they are no longer expected to conclude. Emotions soften because they are no longer required to make sense. Incompleteness becomes relief. This is why sleep often comes when you stop caring whether things make sense. Meaning is a daytime activity. At night, meaning dissolves, and that dissolution is not loss. It is restoration. The mind resists this because it fears chaos. It imagines that if things are left incomplete, they will pile up, overwhelm you, or fall apart. Zen points out that this already happens every night, and yet you wake up capable of continuing. Unfinished thoughts do not harm you. Unfinished feelings do not poison you. Unfinished days do not break you. They simply wait. You do not need to resolve today before sleeping. You do not need to understand yourself. You do not need to feel at peace with everything that happened. You do not need to know what comes next. All of that can remain open. When you let things be incomplete, the mind stops pushing forward. Without forward pressure, awareness loosens. The body senses that it is no longer being asked to hold anything together. This is the state sleep requires. Zen does not promise closure, it promises release. Release from the burden of finishing, release from the demand to arrive, release from the idea that rest must be earned through completion. Tonight, you are allowed to leave things unfinished. You are allowed to stop mid-thought. You are allowed to drift without conclusion. You are allowed to rest without understanding. Nothing needs to be wrapped up. Nothing needs to be settled. Nothing needs to be complete. And when the mind finally accepts this, when it stops trying to close what cannot be closed, the final resistance dissolves. What remains is openness without effort. And in that openness, The body quietly does what it has been waiting to do all along. It lets you sleep. 25. Nothing more is required of you. A Zen teacher once told his students, "When you are exhausted, stop asking yourself to be anything at all." This teaching is simple, but it is one of the hardest for the mind to accept, because it confronts the deepest habit you carry into the night, the belief that you are still required to do something. Even when the body is lying down, even when the lights are off, even when the day has clearly ended, there is often a quiet pressure underneath everything, a sense that you are still responsible, still expected, still supposed to hold yourself together, stay aware, stay prepared, stay functional. Zen sees this pressure as the final barrier to rest. Throughout the day, your sense of self is built around requirement. You are required to think, respond, decide, manage, and perform. This requirement becomes so constant that it feels like identity itself. You no longer notice it as effort. It feels normal to be on all the time. At night, when the body asks to shut down, this habit does not automatically stop. The mind keeps asking for purpose. It keeps checking whether everything is okay. It keeps waiting for instructions. It does not know how to exist without obligation. Zen teaches that rest begins when obligation ends, not when it is fulfilled, not when it is justified, but when it is released. Nothing more is required of you tonight. This is not reassurance. It is a factual statement. There is no task you must complete in order to be allowed to sleep. There is no mental state you must reach. There is no emotional resolution you must achieve. The belief that something is still required is a leftover from the day. During the day, requirement keeps you alive and functional. At night, it keeps you awake. The mind resists letting go of requirement because it fears irrelevance. It believes that if it stops being useful, it will disappear or lose value. Zen gently exposes this fear as false. You are not valuable because you are useful. You are useful because you are alive. Rest does not threaten that. Consider how the body behaves when it truly knows nothing is required. Breathing deepens, muscles release, the face softens. Awareness loses its sharp edges. None of this is commanded. It happens automatically when pressure is removed. The problem is that the mind rarely removes pressure. It replaces one requirement with another. If you are not required to work, you are required to sleep. If you are not required to solve problems, you are required to relax. If you are not required to stay awake, you are required to fall asleep. Zen sees this pattern clearly. Turning rest into a requirement defeats rest. The moment you believe you must sleep, sleep becomes another task. Tasks require effort. Effort keeps the nervous system active. The system cannot shut down while it believes something is expected of it. Zen offers a radical shift. There is nothing expected of you now. Not to think less, not to feel better, not to become calm, not to drift, not to disappear. Even rest itself is not required. This is deeply unsettling for the mind because it removes all structure. The mind wants rules, it wants conditions, it wants a checklist. Without these, it feels unmoored. Zen does not rush to stabilize this feeling. It allows it to dissolve naturally. When nothing is required, the mind eventually stops asking what it should do next. Without that question, movement slows. Without movement, effort fades. Without effort, the body recognizes safety. Safety is not created by control. It is recognized when control is no longer necessary. Many people believe they are anxious at night because of their thoughts. In reality, they are anxious because they believe they are failing at something. Failing to relax, failing to sleep, failing to shut down properly. Zen removes the possibility of failure. If nothing is required, nothing can be failed. This realization alone can quiet the nervous system more deeply than any technique. The mind may protest. It may say, "But if nothing is required, then what happens?" Zen answers, "What has always happened? Life continues. Breathing continues. The heart continues. Awareness fades and returns. You do not need to supervise any of this. You have lived your entire life inside systems that function without your conscious control. Sleep is one of them. At night, the body is not asking you to do anything. It is asking you to stop doing. This stopping cannot be forced. It happens when the mind finally believes that it is allowed to stop. The deepest resistance often comes from responsibility. You may feel that letting go is irresponsible, that staying alert is a form of care, that holding on protects something important. Zen asks you to look closely at this belief. What exactly are you protecting right now? There is no immediate danger. There is no urgent decision. There is no action that must be taken. Holding on is not protecting anything. It is only prolonging effort. Zen does not accuse the mind of wrongdoing. It understands that the habit of holding on developed for survival, but habits that protect during the day harm at night. Wisdom is knowing when to release them. Nothing more is required of you does not mean nothing matters. It means nothing needs your attention right now. This distinction is crucial. Things matter during the day because you can act on them. At night, acting is impossible. Holding on without action is pointless. When the mind accepts that nothing is required, a profound shift occurs. The sense of being responsible for the moment dissolves. Awareness no longer needs to stay sharp. The body no longer needs to stay ready. This is the state Zen points toward, not through instruction, but through permission. Permission to stop trying. Permission to stop monitoring. Permission to stop holding yourself together. The mind often waits for permission from outside, from authority, from circumstance, from exhaustion. Zen offers permission directly. You are allowed to stop now, not later, not after one more thought, not after one more adjustment. Now, the body responds immediately to this permission, even if only partially at first. Tension eases, thoughts slow, sensations become less defined, awareness begins to blur. The mind may panic briefly when this happens. It may try to reassert control, to ask what is happening, to bring clarity back. This is the last reflex of habit. Zen advises patience here, not effort. Let the reflex pass. Do not argue with it. Do not follow it. Without reinforcement, it fades. What remains is a quiet absence of demand. This absence is not emptiness. It is fullness without pressure. In this state, sleep is no longer something you are trying to do. It is simply what happens when nothing is being demanded of you. You do not need to reach it. You do not need to notice it. You do not need to deserve it. Sleep arrives the way darkness arrives when the sun sets. It is not an achievement. It is a consequence of conditions. Zen teaches that the most profound rest comes when the self steps aside completely, not dramatically, not heroically, quietly. When nothing more is required of you, the self has no job to do. Without a job, it relaxes. Without tension, it dissolves. What remains is simple functioning without effort. Breathing continues. The heart continues. The body continues. And awareness fades without resistance. This is the deepest lesson of the night. Not that you must sleep, but that you are finally allowed to stop. Nothing more is required of you. And in that truth, the final barrier falls away, and rest takes you without asking permission. 26. Let go without trying to let go. A Zen teacher once said, "If you are trying to let go, you are still holding." This lesson cuts to the most subtle and stubborn habit of the mind. Even after you understand that rest is allowed, that nothing is required, that awareness can fade, there is often one last effort left, the effort to release. This effort is quiet, almost invisible, but it keeps the system awake. You tell yourself that you should let go now. You remind yourself to surrender. You instruct your body to relax. You encourage your mind to stop. All of this sounds gentle, but it is still effort. It is still the mind attempting to manage the process. Zen sees this clearly. Letting go cannot be done intentionally. The moment intention enters, letting go turns into another task. This is why so many people feel stuck at the edge of sleep. They are not tense in an obvious way. They are calm, quiet, even peaceful, but they are still doing something. They are still leaning slightly forward, waiting for the moment they finally let go. That waiting is the problem. The mind does not know how to stop on command. It only stops when it sees that stopping is already safe. Trying to let go implies that something is still unsafe, still unfinished, still requiring attention. Zen teaches that release happens when effort becomes unnecessary, not when effort is applied. Think about how you let go of a sound after it fades. You do not decide to release it. You do not practice releasing it. It disappears because it no longer exists. The same is true for tension. When the reason for tension disappears, tension ends by itself. At night, the reason tension remains is not danger, but habit. The habit of control, the habit of involvement, the habit of effort. Trying to let go reinforces these habits. Zen does not ask you to stop trying. It asks you to notice trying, not to change it, but to see it clearly. The moment trying is seen for what it is, it begins to lose momentum. This is the key difference between forcing and understanding. Forcing says, "I must relax now." Understanding says, "There is still effort here." Understanding does not intervene. It does not correct. It simply reveals. When effort is revealed without judgment, it softens on its own. Many people confuse letting go with collapsing. They think it means dropping all awareness suddenly or becoming unconscious by force. Zen does not teach collapse. It teaches easing out of effort gradually, without direction. Letting go is not something you aim at. It is what happens when aiming stops. This is why Zen often emphasizes sitting without goal, listening without focus, being without intention. When intention drops away, the system reorganizes itself naturally. At night, the same principle applies. You do not need to make yourself let go. You do not need to encourage surrender. You do not need to remind yourself to relax. All of these keep the mind active. Instead, allow whatever effort remains to exist without interference. If the mind is trying, let it try. If it is waiting, let it wait. If it is watching, let it watch. Do not add another layer by trying to stop it. Without reinforcement, effort cannot sustain itself. It runs out of energy on its own. This is difficult for the mind to accept because it is used to solving problems through action. Zen offers a different resolution. Problems dissolve when they are no longer fed. Letting go is not an act, it is an absence. The absence of instruction, the absence of correction, the absence of direction. When nothing is being pushed or pulled, the system settles into its natural state. This settling does not announce itself. There is no moment you can point to and say, "Now I have let go." If you can point to it, you are still involved. Sleep arrives in the same way. You do not experience the moment of falling asleep because the one who would experience it has already stepped aside. Zen understands this and does not try to capture the transition. Tonight, stop trying to let go. Let go of letting go. Allow the process to complete itself without your participation. When effort finally exhausts itself, not through force but through irrelevance, the body takes over completely. Breathing slows without instruction. Muscles release without command. Thoughts lose structure without being dismissed. And awareness fades without needing to be escorted. You did not let go. Letting go happened when there was nothing left to do. And that is how rest finally deepens beyond reach of effort, beyond intention, beyond even the idea of sleep itself. 27. Even this moment does not need you. A Zen teacher once said, "When you stop trying to experience the moment finally rests." This lesson points to the quietest form of effort still remaining at the very end, the effort to be here at all. After everything else has been released, after the need to fix, improve, monitor, arrive, or let go has softened, there is often one subtle attachment left, the attachment to presence itself. The sense that you should still be experiencing something, noticing something, being aware of something. This attachment is gentle, almost invisible, but it keeps consciousness lightly engaged. Zen sees this clearly. Even presence can become a form of work. You may notice that nothing feels wrong anymore. The body is calm, thoughts are sparse, there is no urgency. And yet, sleep does not fully take you. Something remains slightly alert. That something is the habit of being the one who is here. The mind has learned that awareness equals existence. It believes that if it stops being present, it stops being safe. So it lingers, quietly watching, not doing much, but not leaving either. Zen teaches that even this is unnecessary. The moment does not need you to witness it. Existence does not require observation to continue. Reality does not depend on your awareness to remain intact. You have countless experiences of this already. When you sleep, the moment continues without you. Time passes, the world moves, the body breathes, and nothing collapses. Zen trusts this deeply. The effort to remain present is rooted in fear, not wisdom. Fear that if awareness fades completely, something essential will be lost. Zen gently points out that nothing essential has ever been lost when you rested. Presence is useful when action is required. At night, action has ended. The body does not need a witness to rest. The mind does not need an observer to shut down. Sleep does not need awareness to enter. In fact, awareness prevents it. The final release is not dramatic. It is not something you decide. It is the moment when the need to be here loses relevance. This often feels like drifting, like slipping away, like not quite being anywhere. The mind may briefly react to this with a flicker of alertness, a check-in, a question. That reaction is habit, not danger. Zen does not correct this habit, it allows it to fade. You do not need to stay with the moment. You do not need to accompany experience. You do not need to remain conscious of fading. The moment can exist without you. This understanding removes the last responsibility, the responsibility to be present. When that responsibility dissolves, there is nothing left for the self to do. The self steps aside, not because it is pushed away, but because it is no longer needed. What remains is functioning without identity, breathing without ownership, rest without witness. Zen does not describe this as sleep or awakening. It does not label it at all. Labels belong to awareness, and awareness has already loosened. Tonight, you are allowed to leave the moment unattended. You do not need to stay. You do not need to notice leaving. You do not need to come back. When even the need to be here dissolves, there is no longer anyone left to resist the night. And without resistance, without effort, without presence itself, the body completes the final transition quietly, completely, and on its own. Not because you did something, but because, at last, you stopped being required. 28. There is nothing left to understand. A Zen teacher once said, "When you stop trying to understand, understanding is complete." This lesson comes at the very end, when even subtle effort has thinned, when nothing obvious remains to release, and yet the mind still lingers. It lingers because it believes there is one final realization to grasp, one last insight that will allow everything to settle perfectly. This belief is quiet but powerful. The mind has been trained to resolve things through understanding. During the day, understanding helps you navigate, decide, and act. Over time, the mind begins to believe that understanding is always required, even at night. It assumes that if you can just see things clearly enough, name the right insight, or recognize the final truth, rest will follow. Zen gently dismantles this assumption. Understanding is not needed for sleep. In fact, the search for understanding is one of the last ways the mind keeps itself active. It reviews what it has heard. It checks whether it got it. It tries to integrate, summarize, or internalize. This is still work. It is still movement. It is still engagement. Zen sees that the deepest rest comes not from insight, but from the absence of inquiry. Nothing here needs to make sense right now. Nothing needs to be integrated. Nothing needs to be remembered or applied. The mind does not need to walk away with anything useful. The belief that you must understand before you can rest is another form of control. At night, understanding does not deepen. It fragments. Fatigue turns clarity into fixation. Thoughts circle without resolution. This is not failure of intelligence. It is intelligence being used at the wrong time. Zen assigns understanding to the day and rest to the night. When the mind keeps asking questions at night, it is not seeking truth. It is maintaining momentum. Questions keep attention alive. Attention keeps the nervous system active. Zen does not answer these questions. It lets them fall away. You do not need to understand why you feel the way you feel. You do not need to understand your life. You do not need to understand this teaching. Understanding can wait. It always does. The mind resists this because it fears incompleteness. It thinks that without understanding, something will remain unresolved. Zen points out that understanding does not resolve life. It only describes it. Resolution comes from rest. Sleep reorganizes the mind far more effectively than conscious thought. Patterns loosen. Emotional charge dissipates. Connections are made without intention. In the morning, things often feel clearer, not because you understood them at night, but because you stopped trying. Zen trusts this process completely. This is why Zen teachings often sound repetitive or circular. They are not meant to be mastered. They are meant to exhaust the mind's habit of grasping. When there is nothing left to grasp, the mind stops reaching. Reaching is effort. Effort is wakefulness. When reaching ends, sleep arrives naturally. At this stage, even the desire to get something from this moment can dissolve. You do not need a takeaway. You do not need a lesson. You do not need to remember what was said. Nothing is being asked of you. The body does not need understanding to rest. It needs the absence of demand. When the demand to understand disappears, the system finally stands down completely. There is nothing left to figure out. Nothing left to conclude. Nothing left to resolve. The night is not a puzzle. Zen ends where it began, with simplicity. Sit when sitting, lie down when lying down, sleep when sleeping. Understanding belongs to waking life. Rest belongs to the body. Tonight, you can let understanding go. Let the questions fade without answers. Let the need to make sense dissolve. Let the mind stop reaching for clarity. What remains is not confusion. What remains is quiet. And in that quiet, without comprehension, without insight, without effort, the final barrier dissolves. Sleep does not arrive because you understood something. It arrives because there is nothing left to understand. 29. You can stop existing as a problem. A Zen teacher once said, "When you stop treating yourself as something that must be solved, peace appears on its own." This lesson goes deeper than all the ones before it, because it points to the most hidden source of tension you carry into the night, the belief that you are a problem that must be managed. Most people do not realize how much energy they spend trying to fix themselves. Even when nothing is obviously wrong, there is a background assumption that something about them needs improvement, adjustment, healing, correction, or resolution. This assumption does not turn off when the lights go out. It follows you into bed and keeps the nervous system subtly engaged. Zen sees this clearly. The mind treats the self as a project. All day long, you evaluate yourself, how you performed, how you felt, how you were perceived, how you should be different tomorrow. Even rest becomes part of the project. You try to rest better, sleep better, be calmer, be more present, be more peaceful. At night, this self-improvement instinct becomes poisonous. The body wants to shut down, but the mind keeps watching itself, checking whether it is relaxing correctly, whether it is progressing towards sleep, whether it is doing rest the right way. You are not just awake. You are supervising yourself. Zen understands that sleep is impossible while you are still treating yourself as a problem. A problem requires attention. Attention creates effort. Effort keeps the system awake. As long as you are monitoring yourself, you are signaling that something is wrong. The nervous system responds by staying alert. The most radical thing Zen teaches is that there is nothing wrong with you that needs to be addressed tonight, not later, not subtly, not indirectly. Right now, you are not a problem to be solved. This does not mean life is perfect. It means that this moment does not require correction. The mind resists this idea because it has been trained to believe that vigilance equals safety. It thinks that if it stops monitoring, something bad will happen, that you will regress, that you will lose progress, that you will fall apart. Zen points out that you fall asleep every night without maintaining yourself, and you wake up intact. Your identity does not need overnight maintenance. Your personality does not require supervision. Your future does not depend on nighttime self-analysis. Yet the habit persists because it feels responsible. Zen does not shame this habit. It understands where it came from. You learn to survive by paying attention to yourself, by adapting, by correcting, by staying alert. But survival habits do not always translate into rest habits. What protected you during the day exhausts you at night. When you lie in bed, notice how often thoughts refer back to you, your mistakes, your plans, your worries, your improvement. Even when the content changes, the center remains the same, you as an object of concern. Zen teaches that deep rest begins when you stop making yourself the center of the night. This is not dissociation, it is release. You do not need to think about yourself right now. You do not need to understand yourself. You do not need to fix yourself. You do not need to prepare yourself for tomorrow. The body does not need a better version of you to sleep. It needs you to stop interfering. The self as problem is a mental construct, not a reality. It exists only while attention feeds it. When attention withdraws, the construct dissolves. This is why sleep often feels like relief from being yourself. Not because being yourself is bad, but because maintaining the idea of yourself is tiring. Zen does not ask you to reject who you are. It asks you to stop working on who you are for a while. You are allowed to exist without evaluation. You are allowed to be unfinished. You are allowed to be imperfect. You are allowed to be unresolved. None of this prevents sleep. It enables it. The mind will protest. It will say that this sounds careless, irresponsible, or dangerous. Zen answers with experience, not argument. Every night you disappear into sleep, and every morning you return capable of continuing. This has always been true. Nothing essential is maintained by nighttime self-surveillance. The belief that you must keep yourself together is another form of control. Control feels stabilizing, but it is exhausting. Zen offers something gentler: trust. Trust that you do not need to manage yourself while unconscious. Trust that life does not collapse when you rest. Trust that tomorrow does not need to be rehearsed tonight. When this trust begins to settle, the system relaxes in a way no technique can produce. The breath slows not because you guided it, but because there is no longer anything to manage. Muscles release not because you instructed them, but because the need for readiness has passed. Thoughts thin out not because you suppress them, but because they are no longer being recruited to solve you. This is the turning point. You stop existing as a problem. Without a problem to solve, the mind has no job. Without a job, it stops working. Without work, effort dissolves. Without effort, sleep arrives naturally. Zen does not dramatize this transition. There is no fireworks, no revelation, just a quiet disappearance of tension. The self does not vanish. It rests. The difference is subtle but profound. You are not being fixed. You are being released. Released from the demand to improve. Released from the need to monitor. Released from the belief that something about you must change before rest is allowed. At night, you do not need to be better. You do not need to be healed. You do not need to be wiser. You do not need to be calmer. You need to stop treating yourself as a project. When that happens, something ancient and reliable takes over. The body shifts into restoration mode. Systems you do not control begin doing what they are designed to do. Awareness fades without resistance. You do not notice the moment it happens, because noticing belongs to the self that has already stepped aside. Zen understands this deeply. The deepest sleep comes not from relaxation, not from insight, not from discipline, but from innocence, from no longer assuming that something is wrong. Tonight, nothing is wrong with you. Nothing needs to be solved. Nothing needs to be repaired. Nothing needs to be improved. You can stop existing as a problem now. And when you do, the night finally receives you fully, quietly, and without conditions. 30. Let the night finish you. A Zen teacher once said, "Do not finish the night. Let the night finish you." This lesson comes after everything else has been released, when even the idea of doing nothing has been understood, and yet something very quiet still remains. That something is the assumption that you are the one who must complete the process. Throughout your life, you have been the one who finishes things. You finish tasks. You finish conversations. You finish days. You finish thoughts. This habit becomes so ingrained that even rest feels like something you must complete correctly. You believe you must successfully fall asleep, successfully shut down, successfully disappear. Zen sees the flaw in this belief. Sleep is not something you complete. It is something that completes you. As long as you feel responsible for the ending of the night, part of you stays awake. Responsibility implies agency. Agency implies effort. Effort keeps the nervous system alert. The system cannot power down while it believes the outcome depends on you. The night does not need your help. The night is older than you. It has finished millions of beings without instruction. It knows how to dissolve tension, reorganize the mind, restore the body, and reset perception. Your involvement is not required. In fact, your involvement is the only thing that interferes. Zen teaches that at a certain point, even letting go must be let go of, not as an idea, but as responsibility. You are no longer the one guiding the descent. You are the one being guided. This is difficult for the mind to accept because it reverses the usual relationship. You are used to directing your experience. Here, experience takes over. The mind resists this by staying slightly alert, slightly present, slightly responsible. It tells itself that it is just being careful. But this care is unnecessary. Nothing is at risk. Letting the night finish you means allowing the final handoff to occur. It means acknowledging that whatever still remains will dissolve without your supervision. It means trusting that the process does not need your awareness to complete. You have already done everything that could possibly be done. You have stopped fixing. You have stopped improving. You have stopped monitoring. You have stopped trying to let go. Now, even stopping becomes irrelevant. The body is already leaning toward sleep. The mind is already thinning. The sense of self is already loosening. There is nothing left for you to accomplish. Zen understands that the final resistance often feels like hovering. Not thinking, not doing, just being lightly present. This presence feels harmless, but it still keeps a thread of control intact. Let the thread drop. Not deliberately, not forcefully. Simply stop holding it. You do not need to witness the end of the night. You do not need to be present for the transition. You do not need to remain available. The night is capable of completing itself. When you let the night finish you, something subtle but decisive happens. The sense of being the center dissolves. Experience no longer needs a manager. Awareness no longer needs a position. The body no longer waits for permission. This is not surrender as an act. It is surrender as inevitability. The night does not ask whether you are ready. It only waits for you to stop insisting on being involved. You may notice a feeling like slipping, like falling backward without resistance. The mind may briefly react, wondering what is happening. That reaction is habit. It does not need to be answered. Do not reassure it. Do not calm it. Do not follow it. Without reinforcement, it fades. The final transition into sleep is not experienced because the experiencer is no longer present. This is not loss. It is rest. Zen does not describe this moment because description belongs to waking life. At this point, there is nothing left to describe. Let the night take over completely. Let it finish what you cannot. Let it untie the last knots without asking permission. You do not need to cross a threshold. You do not need to disappear correctly. You do not need to arrive at sleep. You only need to stop standing in the way. The night knows how to finish you gently. And when it does, there is no effort, no awareness, no responsibility left. Only restoration, only rest. Only the quiet completion that happens when you finally allow the night to do what it has been waiting to do all along. The night does not need anything more from you. You have already loosened every grip that mattered. You have already stepped aside from effort, from responsibility, from the need to understand or control. There is nothing left to prepare, nothing left to release, nothing left to complete. What remains does not require your attention. Let the darkness hold what you no longer need to carry. Let the body finish its work without supervision. Let awareness fade without being followed. You do not have to go anywhere. You do not have to become anything. You do not have to remain. Rest is not something you do now. It is something that happens when you finally allow yourself to stop. The night has you, and when morning comes, it will return you gently, without effort, without loss. For now, let everything fall quiet.